Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're just about to get started. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Meredith. I am working with the Protection International team. We're very excited to have you with us today for the unveiling of a project that has been many months in the making, over a year actually. My colleague Daniel Barrera and I will be your hosts today. But before we get started, I just wanted to quickly run through some basic housekeeping things for the webinar. First things first, we do have live interpretation for this event. So to hear the English, Spanish, or French audio channels, please click the interpretation button, which looks like a little globe at the bottom of your Zoom application window, and select your desired language. Interpretation is only possible through the Zoom application, mind you, and not the web browser. And please submit any questions or comments to your fellow participants through the chat function. It should be available for everybody to see along the side. And if you have any questions for today's presenters, you can submit them through the Q&A function, which you'll also see at the bottom of your screen. Today's presentation is relatively short, only about 45 to 50 minutes. So we can't guarantee that we're going to get to every single question, but we're going to do our best. And before we begin, we just want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded as well as live streamed on both Facebook and LinkedIn. And to say from the start, the space is meant to be inclusive. So discrimination, harassment, hate speech, or any type of defamatory language is not going to be tolerated. But having said that, please send all of your questions and comments throughout the entire duration of the webinar today, especially if you have any ideas on how you think the Focus Observatory can be useful for you or your work in your organization. We'd love to hear from you. And if you don't do so already, please follow us on social media to hear more updates about Protection International's projects, announcements, job opportunities, you name it, everything is there. It's our main point for posting the latest news. I'll post the links to the social media channels in the chat now, and I'll pass it over to Danny, who is going to walk us through today's agenda.
Hola, sí, muchas gracias, Mere. Buenas tardes.
Hello, thank you, Mere, and a good afternoon to all of you. Very briefly, I would like to mention what we will do during this very short, very brief event. Firstly, we'll start the event with a very brief welcome statement by Mauricio, who is in charge of the Research and Training Division of Protection International. After that, we'll hand over the floor to Enrique Eguren, and he's going to speak to us about the sense and the meaning of the platform that we're launching today. And why did we consider at the time that it was necessary to have a platform like this? And we'll see how it works in a very, very schematic way. And then we'll listen to different presentations by 3 different speakers that we have invited from 3 different regions of the world. With us in the launching of the platform, we'll have the guest speakers so that they can tell us about the significance of a new legal framework, new public policies for protection of human rights defenders, and how that translates into practice in the specific conflicts of the regions where they live. Our guest speakers are firstly Sukhgerel Dugersuren from Mongolia. She has recorded her presentation partly because it is really late in Mongolia and partly because the internet connection is quite unstable. So she has recorded her presentation. And after that, we'll have 2 live presentations, one by Guillermo from the Center for Justice and International Law. He's going to talk to us about the current situation in Latin America. And then Adelaide Kame from the International Service for Human Rights, who is going to introduce the situation from the point of view of ISHR. And we'll have a Q&A session, including the questions that you send via the chat. And finally, we will have a closing presentation. And without further ado, we're going to post the link on the chat to allow you to have access to the platform so you can test the platform, you can play with the platform, and become more familiar with the platform. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Mauricio Angel from Protection International, who is going to speak to us.
Yes,
you have the floor.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being here with us today. Indeed, I'm really happy to be here for the official launch of the brand new Focus website. This has been the natural evolution of our Focus report publication, initially in PDF and printed versions, where we tried taking stock of what was happening in the field of protection mechanisms, legal frameworks, and public policies for the protection of human rights defenders some years ago. But as you will see from the different interventions, the growing interest in the topic and expansion to other countries in Latin America, Africa, and also Asia is such that we in Protection International felt the need to make the qualitative jump and move our ongoing research on this topic to the digital sphere. This is one of the reasons why the website kept this name, Focus. But I wouldn't like to really get ahead of the presentations, not to give any spoilers. So maybe better if we have a look at a short animation video that explains a bit more about Focus. Please, Meredith.
Perfect. So then we'll hand it over to Kike, which he is one of the people who conceptualized this idea and has been very central in putting it together. So we'll pass it over to you, Kike.
Well, thank you, Meredith. I'll just make a very few comments on the origin of Focus and the reason. We're going to see some slides on the screen. Firstly, this will be the main slide on the screen. As you can see, over the last few years, from 2014, I would say, we've seen a clear increase in the number of countries that have been involved in public debates on public policies, on protocols, laws, and bills to protect human rights defenders. As you can see, around 34 countries, that's 18% of UN member states, have had some involvement. Of course, not all countries have a specific law or a public policy, but from 2014, there has been a tremendous increase. So we thought that it makes sense to do some research on this phenomenon. Next slide, please. We've had the privilege to learn from local organizations in each country. Those local organizations have been involved in drafting the public policies. And we have cooperated in three different ways. Firstly, via research on current public policies, on the opinion of civil society organizations and the opinion of some governments. We've also given support and assessment both to civil society organizations and, as you can see on the screen, to civil servants and staff of governments of different countries. Obviously, Focus has to give an answer to the following question: how can we improve those public policies? How can we have a sustainable development so that the continuous attacks towards HRDs will be prevented by governments and states? We think that Focus can make the difference in order to gather information and be a source of information for civil society organizations and public authorities in different countries and international organizations, that can share their experience. Thank you. Oh, I'll hand over the floor to Daniel. Thank you again. Well, thank you, Quique. What we're going to do now, although you all have access now, I hope you can see the screen that I'm sharing. Yes, I was saying that you all have access to the platform via the link we've shared. But nevertheless, I'd like to describe the website live on the screen, and we can see how Focus works. As you can see, there are 4 sections. You can see them at the top, the database. That's basically the main part of Focus, the heart of Focus, and I'll go back to the database to analyze that in further detail. Then about this project, that's the second section. Basically, that would be what Quique just said: the why, the how, the justification, the how we work, all of that. The third section, key elements, elementos clave in Spanish on the screen. We describe different concepts. What's a human rights defender? Why are those public policies necessary? What's the role of states? So basically, describing different concepts, and then news, noticias in Spanish. That's where we will inform on different events or news in anything related to public policies to protect human rights defenders. Maybe not many, but there are some news, and we would like to share those news so that this will be a reference point that we can check every time we want to know what's happening around the globe when it comes to public policy. So let's go back to the database, base de datos in Spanish on the screen. That's the main part of the platform. What do we have here? What's the content? Firstly, I'd like to know, or I'd like to tell you basically, that we want it to be user-friendly, easy to use. And the most important thing is the content. We have structured the database by continents, by regions. So firstly, you can choose the continent, and then in each continent, we have regions and countries. The countries we have information on. Not all countries are there, and not all regulations are there. And why is that? Well, just like Kike said, over the last few years, many things have changed. There have been many new developments, and not just in many countries, but also in different regions or states inside each country, different provinces. So we have a lot of information. We just don't want to post the information on the website. No, we want to analyze the information. It's more than just posting the information, and that requires, obviously, a lot of work, a lot of effort and resources that we're investing currently. It's a dynamic platform and a collaborative one. And by that, we mean that we offer the platform, but of course, what we really want is for you to help us to improve the platform, to make it bigger. There is a lot of information that we don't have access to yet. So with your help, we can make that information available for everyone who's interested in this topic. So again, any information you might have that is not on the platform yet and that you can share with us will be very welcome. Information is also broken down by different categories. A type of regulation, it can be a law, a bill, a decree, a decision by a court, and some studies and analytical studies. And I'd like to dwell a bit on this because most of the participants today are members of civil society organizations. So again, we would like to have more information. Studies, reports that come from you, from your own organizations. If you give us permission, we would love to share those studies and all the research that you've carried out with anyone who can be interested in this topic. Information is also broken down by author, type of author. It can be a regional organization like the Inter-American Human Rights Commission and other international bodies, regional bodies, international organizations like the UN, national authorities, civil society organizations, and others. The last category would be the status of the process. Is the bill or the law already approved? Is it being discussed? Is it in the process of being approved, or has it been, is it stagnated? Has it been frozen in time? We thought that it was important to have information about that. Another possibility to access the information other than the database would be to see what I'm showing you on the screen. It's a map. So instead of checking the database, oh, I'm sorry, it looks like the map is alive and it's moving without me doing anything. So you can see on the screen the different status of each law. Red or dark orange means that that particular country has some type of regulation to protect human rights defenders. That's existing legislation. Then light orange would be a country where that regulation is being discussed, there are some developments when it comes to that type of legislation or regulation. And the countries that we see in gray are countries where there were developments at some point, but that's completely stagnated. Nothing has happened for a long time. Basically, that's what you can see if you check the map. On the map, we can also search by region. But basically, let's put this into practice. We have Guillermo with us. Let's click on Mexico. So what do we see? We click on Mexico. We see a brief description of the situation in the country that we try and keep up to date. In some countries, the information is more up to date than in others, but we're working on that. We want to have everything up to date. And for each country, you can see different types of regulations, laws or decrees. In the case of Mexico, it's a specific state in Mexico, Guanajuato. That's the regulation, the law. That would be the national law for Mexico, for the country as a whole, and then different studies by some of the Mexican civil society organizations that they've sent to us so we can share on the platform. Well, that's all. Hopefully you find this useful. Hopefully it's user-friendly. And if you find anything that should be modified, we can find us here. You can click on contact or the different social networks, RSS. And then if you click on contact, you can share anything, small mistakes that you find on the information on our website or things that are missing, any comments you'd like to make, and then reports from your organizations. Anything you want to share with the world. You can post anything on the chat if you have any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Danny. So now we'll move forward into the meat of the discussion about some public policies themselves. We're going to start with the video intervention. In April of this year, the Mongolian parliament adopted a new law for human rights defenders, making it the first country in Asia to provide a framework of protection for those who speak out against human rights violations and advocate for change. As the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has said, now it's important that this bill be implemented according to international standards with a genuine, independent, and fully resourced mechanism, setting a high standard for how these laws should be realized throughout the region and beyond. This law will enter into force on the 1st of July of this year, and Sukhgerel Dugersuren, the director of OT Watch Mongolia, has been heavily involved in the process that has led to this important moment. So as we mentioned, unfortunately, she can't be live with us now, but she sent us this video with her remarks, including some insights and lessons learned throughout the process of having this law adopted. So without further ado, we'll watch this short presentation.
Greetings to participants of Protection International's Focus Observatory launch event. My name is Sukhgerel Dugersuren, and as introduced, I'm a human rights defender from Mongolia. I have been requested to share my experience of working on a human rights defender law, to share experience about what was good, what was bad, and what lessons should be learned, and the whole process of how it started and went to the completion of the law. In order to help you understand the process, I'd like to give a few facts about Mongolia. Mongolia is a huge resource-rich land setting next door to resource-hungry China. Its tiny 3 million population made development institutions believe and promise to create a Mongolia for foreign investors, and started it without the needed legal and governance framework in place. Mongols to date wear these boots with nose up, to not to kick a stone out of its place, to not dig land was a law. This tradition was tossed by neoliberal extractivist development policy, resulting in resource curse, with all its social and economic consequences. Global trend of uncontrolled extractivism resulting in land and resource grab, violating all human rights of local communities, is experienced by nomadic herders here in Mongolia too. Mining license and land permits became a lucrative and corrupt business. Reporting on these or protesting against mining has led to widespread harassment, including killings of anti-mining activists and journalists. Human rights defender protection recommendations have been received by Mongolia in its first and second UPR cycle review. In 2016, a working group was established under the aegis of the Human Rights Commission. In 2017, the first draft was submitted to the Parliament Subcommittee on Human Rights. In 2019, government of Mongolia rejected twice the draft, and in 2021, in April, the law was passed, with it coming into force on July 1st, next month. Key allies throughout the process from 2011 to 2020 and to date were all UN bodies, special rapporteur mechanisms, EU, OECD mechanisms, and also non-governmental organizations such as ISHR, Frontline Defenders, Forum Asia, to name a few. However, the key barriers was an important factor to analyze before and monitoring throughout the law drafting process. While making loud commitments at UNGP, BHR processes, the corporates are making parallel moves in taking over the public decision-making space under the multi-stakeholder rhetoric, turning policy and legislation to protect legitimate investor rights and business reputation. This global trend is also clearly seen in Mongolia. The current Oyu Tolgoi LLC CEO, Armando Torres, sits on the Mongolian Business Council, heads the Mongolian Business Council. Its former CEO, McRae, is the board director of American Chamber. The two must consult stakeholders in the law drafting process. These are responsible for clauses requiring protection of legitimate interests and business reputation of third parties, as included in Article 8.1.3 in the Human Rights Defender Law. Anti-corruption and anti-terrorism requirements and Veit were used to include Article 7.2. These are actions by FATF, which resulted in cutting down resources for defenders at local level. FATF has already recognized that its recommendation number 8 on nonprofits has negatively affected the nonprofit sector as a whole, but also violated key human rights. In Mongolia, who hijacked the process? In 2020, the new Human Rights Commission law was passed. And one of the key changes was the selection of human rights commissioners through an open public hearing, finally dismissing the political appointment process. Selection of 5 non-political professionals is seen as the loss of political clout in the National Human Rights Commission, and possibly one of the reasons of hijacking the human rights defender law protection. By creating a new 6th Human Rights Commissioner position in the Commission, adding a human rights defender protection mechanism and a commissioner responsible for defenders to already underfinanced Human Rights Commission will make it even less effective body with many commissioners and no resources to protect human rights meaningfully. We continue to campaign against these restrictive provisions in the law. And one of the things that we see Focus could do is to analyze corporate takeover of public decision-making space. You've probably seen the report on corporate capture of the United Nations. This process is leading the change in the legal framework in the favor of transnationals. Focus could pull together all existing resources to analyze their capability to counter legal and policy measures taken by development finance to protect the investors and transnational corporations. Focus could help monitor and analyze application of restrictive clauses to recommend change and to set protection standards worldwide. Thank you for your attention. Here's a more detailed timeline of the process, and I would be happy to answer any questions via email or other channels. Thank you again.
So I'll post her email address in the chat very shortly so that you can, in fact, follow up with her if you have questions, since she wasn't able to be here today. But now I'll hand it over to Danny, who's going to introduce our first speaker.
Sí, gracias, Mere. Bueno, primero vamos a
Thanks, Meredith. First of all, we'll have today with us Guillermo Rodríguez Garcia, who is the Advocacy Officer at the Center for Justice and International Law. He's probably one of the people who is most acquainted with all of the policies and mechanisms to protect human rights defenders in Latin America and the world. And he is going to give us some introductory comments as to what does the legal framework look like in Latin America at the moment. Guillermo, it's all yours. Thank you very much for this very generous introduction. Thank you also to Meredith and to all of the team at Protection International. And thank you also to our audience watching us from different parts around the world, live or afterwards. I would like to move on to the Latin American context. And I would like to start with the good news. What has been achieved in the region so far? We have to say Latin America remains one of the most dangerous regions for human rights defenders around the world. However, it is also for this reason that some of the most remarkable achievements have been made in this region. We have to point out at the deficits we still have. However, it is still an important advance. It is still an important sign of progress. I also wanted to say that some countries in Latin America, like Colombia, Brazil, Honduras, and most recently Peru, by using different procedures, they have been able to set up committees and commissions in order to protect human rights defenders And these commissions have kept a very wide scope in order to better protect these people. I would also like to add something positive. In the Latin American region, fortunately, we have managed to change the structure. We have moved from a more vertical way of functioning, from the top to the bottom, to a different system. This system has let us influence the legal framework. The principle is the recognition of the right to defend. The new institutions are more flexible and they are more influential from the grassroots level. In May 2021, the region also adopts a mechanism through an executive decision, in particular in Mexico. And thanks to this decision, the state puts the focus on the prevention and on the protection, as well as the access to justice of defenders. I also wanted to emphasize that we now have some very useful resources to combat and to tackle all of the barriers. One of the most important barriers is that of immunity. We now have a protocol to set up an investigation for crimes against defenders. And achievements like this have achieved a reduction of immunity by 7%. This may not sound like a lot to you, but in our region, this is a major step. Impunity remains extremely high. It is still unacceptable. However, I would like to emphasize the progress that has been made and that this is a step in the right direction. All of these achievements have only been possible thanks to the strength of the movements in the region. These movements, these people have used different strategies. I am here as a spokesperson for CEJIL, for CEJIL. We have used the possibilities that the Inter-American Court for Human Rights give us. Among other tools, we have used the help of the human rights defenders. We have brought several cases of human rights violations to the attention of this court, cases such as that of Guatemala and other countries. We have also carried out raising campaigns to raise awareness, to improve the recognition of human rights defenders, and we have also worked on protection mechanisms themselves. I also wanted to emphasize something else. International institutions are increasingly becoming allies to the cause. This is also thanks to the advocacy work that we've done. Now, we are putting the focus on the obligation to guarantee the right to life and the right to defend. This has been a shift of the paradigm, and this has increased the pressure on the states around the world. Now, what are we lacking? As I said in the beginning, Latin America remains one of the most dangerous regions around the world for human rights defenders. Human rights defenders are being attacked and threatened. We have managed to turn some of the institutions and public bodies and have them be on our side. They have set the focus on protecting life and integrity. But in many cases, they still do not have a wider scope. That is, they don't yet defend the right to defend. And they do not yet combat impunity in the region. As you may be guessing from my presentation, unfortunately, we have not reached an ideal public policy model, which is the goal of every one of us here in this room. However, we have different strategies, different mechanisms. They are not present across the region. They are not homogeneous, and therefore this would be the goal. To conclude, I wanted to say that focus may help us fundamentally. This may be done by improving specialized recommendations. Recently, very valuable work has been carried out in terms of risk assessment for human rights defenders. These assessments would help us to conquer other spaces and to gather more support. You could also help us by compiling best practices in order for us to know them, to exchange them. And of course, lastly, you can brainstorm solutions with us in order for us to keep making progress in this area. Thank you very much and congratulations on this initiative.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. And now we will swiftly transition over to our next speaker. We're also delighted to have Adelaide Kame with us today. She is the Africa Program Manager for the International Service for Human Rights and has been working with them since 2017. Adelaide focuses on supporting and protecting defenders from Africa at the national level, as well as at the African Commission and the UN. Previously, she advocated for the rights of women in Poland and Macedonia, as well as the advancement of freedom of expression in Central Africa. And more recently, she's been working with indigenous peoples and minorities in Mauritania for the better protection of their rights, especially victims of slavery. So, Adelaide, I hand it over to you.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate to the launch of the Focus platform, and congratulations to Protection International for this work. Restrictions associated with the COVID-19 were a terrible blow to the policy for the protection and promotions of human rights defenders adopted in Africa. The launch of that platform could not be more timely. Today, I was requested to talk about laws protecting defenders in Africa, strategies implemented in order to reach the approval of those laws, and challenges today that are obstacle to the implementation of those laws. About the laws and policies adopted in Africa to protect defenders. In Africa, 3 countries have adopted specific legislation to protect and promote defenders at the national level. In 2014, the Côte d'Ivoire was the first country to adopt such a law. The implementation decree was applied in 2017. Burkina Faso did the same in 2017 and Mali in 2018. The decree were adopted in 2020. Those laws are based on a model law for defenders. They take into account the particularities of the national context of those countries. Those laws are a source of inspiration for many countries in Africa, and some of them refer to them in the process of approval of such laws. Particularities of those laws is that they take into account the needs of specific groups of defenders, that these are women and disabled people. While taking into account those specific people, they recognize the particular and unique violations associated to their genders and conditions, and therefore grant them an adapted protection. Those laws show that the protection of defenders are incredible, and the implementation of the Declaration of the United Nations on Defenders from 1998. But adopting a law is not an end per se. We need to make sure that defenders can work safely, including through the repeal or amendment of restrictive laws. That is as important. Now maybe let's move to the strategies that led to the approval of such laws. You cannot have an efficient protection of defenders while not involving the defenders. It is of the utmost importance to involve defenders, including the most vulnerable, at each step of the process, guarantees their voice to be heard, and also a better ownership of that text by the people it is meant to protect. Also, a draft law coming from the civil society and supported by it results in a law that is supported by defenders. It is important to create a relationship with the different stakeholders, such as the ministry in charge of human rights, the national institutions in charge of human rights, and parliamentarians. They are key in order to support the claims of defenders once the draft law is presented to the government or to the National Assembly, to guarantee that the most important rights are kept in the draft law. The opportunities and mechanisms available at the national and international level should not be neglected. The use of special procedures and of the periodic reviews of the human rights situation in the country can also be used in order to amplify the voice of defenders and put pressure on the different governments so that they contemplate the adoption of such laws while respecting international and regional laws in order to defend human rights defenders. However, we more often than not realize that most stakeholders involved in the process do not understand why such a law is necessary or why the work of defenders is of the utmost importance against a democratic backdrop. Raising the awareness of such actors and mainly of the population is key. Finally, I would like to conclude talking about the challenges that we met for the implementation of those laws. There are two main challenges hindering the implementation of those laws. First of all, the lack of knowledge by defenders and authorities of the existence and the content of the law. Many times we have been able to discuss with defenders from the Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso and Mali, and some of them were not aware of the existence of such a law. Judges were not aware of the existence of those laws or the way to implement them. That's why we keep on working with defenders to make sure that they are equipped with the right tools to implement them, but also with the authorities, because with the laws, the authorities will be aware of the key role they play in the defense of defenders, and they will be more at ease to guarantee those rights. Finally, a key element is the implementation of a protection mechanism of defenders. Today in Ivory Coast, in Burkina Faso and in Mali, those mechanisms were legally created by different texts, but are still struggling to be efficiently working. Those were implemented and to prevent violations of those rights. Up until now, the actions of those mechanisms are limited or inexistent in spite of all the needs. If those mechanisms cannot work efficiently, those laws are not impactful enough, while in an environment where civil space is completely shrunk, they are necessary. And I will stop here for my presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Adelaide. Yes, as you noted and as Guillermo noted, hopefully Focus will be filling one of these main gaps, which is about awareness raising, knowledge exchange, and really getting on board from the beginning of the process in order to take lessons learned from the adoption of laws that are already in existence, like in Côte d'Ivoire and in Mali and Burkina. I will hand it over to my colleague, Kike, to intervene. It seems we really are running out of time, so we won't have the opportunity to ask many questions, but we'll do our best to speed through a few. Kike?
Gracias, Meredith. Una pregunta breve para ambos.
Thank you, Meredith. I wanted to ask a brief question to Adelaide and to Guillermo. What do you think would be the next or the first step in order to assess the positive impact of the mechanisms and the policies, and how can we also involve the authorities in this evaluation?
Quizá, Guillermo, si por el mismo orden, si puedes empezar.
Maybe if Guillermo could start, just following the order of the interventions. Thank you very much, Kike. First of all, I think we have to identify good practice, best practices, and the distinguishing features. We have to ascertain what the defining features are of the mechanisms adopted. As I was saying in my introduction, in Latin America, we are still very far from what we would call an ideal model. And therefore, I think it would be important to first define what practices could be promising and positive. I was talking about the protocol of investigation of crimes against defenders. This has been implemented in Guatemala. Thanks to this protocol there, impunity was reduced by 7% in Guatemala when it comes to the assassination of defenders. Therefore, in this particular case, I think it would be very interesting to do assessments on the impact of these policies in order to ascertain if these policies, if these mechanisms have been positive. I think it would be important to have hard data to support this. What are the main things to bear into consideration? They may seem like very general principles, but they remain fundamental. Why did this very initiative work? What is missing for this initiative to become more profound? As the colleague was mentioning, one of the problems why the protocol is not applied correctly may be the lack of awareness in case of the judicial operators. And lastly, third question, can we reproduce this model in a different context? Those be the three main takeaway ideas that spring to mind.
As far as I'm concerned, I would like to echo what Guillermo just said on mechanisms and on implemented measures in order to ensure the implementation of the law, protection mechanisms, or some rights that are provided in laws in Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, or Mali. They provide for the protection of the family members of the defender if the defender would be in jeopardy. How does the state contemplate implementing those provisions? We could use that in order to make sure that the state guarantees the implementation of the law. Secondly, another point mentioned by Guillermo, the training of authorities. They are the first contact point with the defenders. Is the law included in the training of the police officer, of the gendarmerie officer? Are judges aware of the approval of the new law, the content of the law, and the rights emanating from them, the rights that they are supposed to apply in the decisions, the court decision that they take in favor of defenders? All those measures will help us check if the law is implemented in such countries.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. We are really out of time. So unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it here. I'm just going to pass over the floor to my colleague Mauricio for some concluding remarks. But if there are more questions, suggestions, ideas, please feel free to send us an email. I'm posting right now the email addresses of some of the members of the Protection International team who are involved with this Focus Observatory. Thank you all for joining us. Mauricio, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Meredith. Maybe to wrap up, and first of all, I would like to thank you all for being here. Thank you also to the panelists for sharing their views and ideas on what is happening in the different regions of the world, and also the potential that Focus has. I would like to wrap up at least with 3 points. The first one is about the past. And it is that Focus can be a knowledge management tool. As you have seen, this brand new website, Focus, builds on the legacy of the research that we have been doing in Protection International around public policies, but also on ongoing research and support to civil society organizations, state authorities, and national human rights institutions and regional mechanisms. UN bodies, special procedures, which have an interest in promoting public policies to protect the right to defend human rights. So it is basically a place, a platform where we can try to put all this information in a single place where we can have access to it and try to learn from what is happening in different regions of the world. I would also say a word about the present of this project. Now that we have launched it today with your support, with your presence here, this is a living project. So PI will continue to feed the website with information, and for this it will be key that your organization help us with sharing information that we can disseminate through Focus. The ambition of Focus is to become this go-to website, as I said before, for consultation on the topic, for anyone to be able to download relevant information per country, also to have access to informative materials, such as explanatory videos, interviews, infographics, etc. And the last word is about the future of Focus. Which is a collaborative project, a collaborative platform. This is one ambition that we have, that other civil society organizations and NGOs see the value of the website to showcase your work on this topic in the countries where you are working. For government bodies and national human rights institutions with a mandate on human rights defenders protection, as well as the regional mechanisms and UN special procedures to access best practices on this field, and hopefully for the future to have other organizations to also promote and support this website. That is, that Focus becomes a joint collaborative initiative of like-minded organizations. We really hope that Focus will be the starting point for a fruitful collaboration, for exchanges and learning among all of us on the topic of public policies to protect the right to defend human rights. Thank you very much.
Bueno, gracias Mauricio, gracias a las ponentes que nos han acompañado.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. Thank you to our panelists and to our audience. And above all things, thank you to all of those who, from the countries and regions, keep defending human rights. Thank you very much to all of you for your participation, and we will keep in touch and continue working. Thank you.